let's just say that your partner was making a decision that was going to impact you and your life forever. Would you want to be involved in that decision at all? Would you want to be clued into that? Or would you like for them to just come to that decision on their own and then surprise you with that decision once they've made it? Of course, the answer is no, I want to be involved in that. But yet they're over here doing that very thing, which is
Right.
I have to come to this decision all on my own because I'm so afraid to have the difficult conversation with my spouse that I feel so disconnected from you and I don't know what to do.
Welcome to the Couples Therapist Couch, the podcast for couples therapists, marriage counselors, and relationship coaches to explore the practice of couples therapy. And now, your host, Shane Birkel.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Couples Therapist Couch. This is the podcast that's all about the practice of couples therapy. I'm Shane Birkel. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm here to bring you the most up-to-date information on how to help people have a better relationship. So whether you're a therapist who's looking to learn more about working with couples or a person who just wants to have better relationships, I'm hoping that this information will be valuable for you. I try to bring on many of the leaders in the world of couples therapy for interviews. So if you're interested in this, definitely subscribe and like the episode. I'd be really, really grateful for that. And if you're interested in the Couples Therapist Inner Circle, there's more information about that in the show notes, and you can click the link to find out more. So thank you so much. Please click subscribe, and I hope you enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Couples Therapist Couch. This is Shane Birkel, and today I'm speaking with Sharon Pope, relationship coach and author of the best-selling book, Stay or Go. Hey Sharon, welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you, Shane?
Good. I'm really excited to talk about this today. I know a lot of people are struggling to figure out, should I stay in this relationship or not? Or is it, should I put in the huge amount of work that's going to be required to save this thing? Or is it even worth it? So I'm excited to talk about that. But why don't you tell everyone a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, so I tend to help women who are in midlife and they're struggling in what feels like a lonely and disconnected marriage. And I help them get the confidence and clarity that they need to be able to figure out, can I evolve this relationship to a place that feels really good for me? Or is the only answer to end it? And how in the world do I do that without the big one is regret? The fear of regret is the one that keeps people stuck in indecision for a long time.
Yeah, because once you make that decision, you can't really go back.
Right. Now, I tell people like if you decide to stay, there's an impermanence to that decision, right? Because even though we try to lock it down with till death do us part, my favorite 5 words, we try to lock it down to give ourselves some security. But the reality of relationships is that the minute one person chooses or stops choosing the relationship, I should say, the relationship itself is in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is like there's an impermanence to, like, you might say, I'm staying for today. I'm staying
Yeah.
for this week. I'm choosing to stay. And then that helps you feel empowered in your decision, as opposed to if I say I'm staying today, that means I have to stay forever. And that people's resistance, they'll come up against that and they'll resist wanting to make this stay decision. So they'll stay in this perpetual indecision.
Mm-hmm.
Where when it comes to ending the marriage, there is a permanence to that. Now, we all know someone, what is it, 10% of people who divorce and remarry. I actually have a friend who did that,
Oh, really? Yeah.
but it is not common. So there's sort of a permanence to the decision to end it, but there's an impermanence to the decision to stay. But if you're going to be in it, then why wouldn't you want to keep working towards making it feel good?
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. I love that. I heard someone say recently, if you want to get divorced in 3 months from now, that's totally fine. But in the meantime, why don't you work hard on these things if you're going to choose to stay? And I love the way you said it, as far as like every day when you wake up, it's an empowered decision that you're making to be in
Yeah.
this relationship. It's your choice.
Right. It's a very different come from, if you will, to say, I'm choosing to stay here, to keep working on this relationship, to see if it can evolve to something that can feel good for me, or I'm trapped. I'm
Mhm.
stuck.
Right.
I can't possibly because, oh my God, because I'm of all the fears of what it would take, or if I left, what I would have to face if I left. And so all those fears just keep you stuck in this place of indecision. And then I say, like, then you just become comfortable with a pain that you come to know, right? If you think about most women, and I primarily deal with women, but most women will stay in a place of indecision of should I stay or should I go for years, asking themselves this question like every single day if they're in that place. And it almost becomes like a whoopee blanket, like a little comfort that feels comfortable because it's familiar. They know how to wake up in that every day. It's not that it feels comfortable and it's not what they want. Being in indecision is a really difficult place to be. But the thought of taking action one way or the other is terrifying because I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how it's going to turn out. It feels scary. What if it doesn't work? All the things, right? And then so people just stay right here in this middle place, but if you never take any action in a new direction, you never learn anything new. And I often just tell people, like, if you're in indecision, it means you need more information. It might be, I need more information about what can this relationship evolve to, or can't it? But you don't know if you never start pressing those buttons and pushing those elements of your relationship to see what is possible.
Well, yeah, and gathering that information or pushing those buttons is scary because that could eventually lead to the end of the relationship, taking them out of that familiarity that you're talking about.
And this is really why you and I exist, right? Is that, like, to have a guide through a scary journey?
Yeah, totally.
Is incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
As opposed to just going it alone and thinking, I'll just figure it out. I should know this. Except, how should you know it? How should you? What classes have you taken? What training have you had? Like, how are you supposed to know? We come into marriage with love and hope and maybe a prayer.
Right. Well, yeah, unfortunately, in our society, that's especially true because we don't have a lot of background in how to have a good relationship. There was something you were talking about that I thought was important too. It made me think of, this idea that people feel like I'm going to be a bad person if I leave this relationship, or I have to stay because of the kid. I can't do this to my kids, or, this is what I should be doing. And I think that's part of what creates that stuckness that you were talking about for people.
For sure. I mean, everyone's got their list of fears that's what keeps them stuck because they don't know how, like, I often, when I start teaching about fears and how to navigate your fears and stuff, I often say I should be teaching this stuff to third graders because I wish we would know some of this basic stuff about how to manage your mind and how to move through fears and what's really happening at a very young age. But we don't learn that either, and so we bring that into our relationships. But the fear of I'm going to be judged is a very common one, and sometimes by myself because he's a good man or she's a good woman. She's the mother of my children, so that's a fear. And the kids is always a fear. Now, when I'm dealing with a more mature woman, kids seem to be less of a fear, but it's still there. I mean, I have clients who their kids are in their 30s and the kids, they have an opinion about mom and dad who've been married for almost 40 years. And now mom and dad are getting a divorce. Wait, what? Was it all a lie? So this idea that I'm going to wait till the kids are 18 and then they'll never be hurt. Like, what? They turn 18 and they have no emotions anymore? No, that just means they're not going to have to move between houses, probably. That's all. But they're still going to have feelings about it. They're still going to have questions about it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I wanted to, because you mentioned you work primarily with women. I wanted to ask what your take is on, do you feel like there are differences in why women might seek a divorce versus men? Obviously, this is a generalization.
Yeah.
But I think there's something about that oftentimes.
Well, so, all right, I'm going to do my best to not get on a whole soapbox here, but there are huge differences. And I think that we're also in a really interesting time right now. So if you go back, like I think about my mother's generation. So I'm 52. My mom, let's see, I was born in 71. So she married my dad late 60s. And it was in the 70s when there was the ability to divorce without cause. Before that, women really couldn't divorce, not unless you could prove that you were being abused or that he cheated or something like that. But like proving that in the 60s, like there were no cell phones. Like when you found out about something or you had to prove something, like it just wasn't like it is today. And then in the 70s was when the government said, and this is in the US, obviously, but the government said, banks, you can loan money to women. But that didn't mean that banks wanted to loan money to women because they weren't a good credit risk. Right. So like I have a really good friend. She's turning 64 this year. And she tells me this story. I love this story. It's not a great, like, it's not a happy thing, but it's a realistic thing. She said, look, I was in my late 20s. I was killing it in the real estate game. I was making $70,000 a year back in the early 70s. And and that's a lot of money for anyone, but especially for a woman, right? And she found this cute little bungalow that she wanted to buy. And it was $64,000. And she went to her banker, who she had sent a ton of business to in the real estate side, and said, I'm going to need a loan. I'm going to need a mortgage for this house I want to buy. And he said, what does your dad think about that? And she said, well, he's excited for me. Why do you ask? And he said, well, you're a single woman. We're going to need, a man to co-sign for you. Would your dad co-sign on the loan for you?
Oh my gosh.
And being the snarky one that she is, she's like, what about my mom? Could my mom co-sign?
Right. Good.
And the banker said, well, is she still married to your dad?
Oh
So one generation ago, women did not have many options. They had a great degree of clarity around what they brought to the marriage and what they expected from it. Like they knew their role, right? You took care of the home, you took care of the kids. And my mother, she did work. When I went off to kindergarten, she went back to work. But she didn't give up any of the other responsibilities, where men did have options. So now today, women have a lot of options. And we don't need the providing necessarily, because we know how to earn a living. And protecting, way back when we were, I don't know, hunting for our own food, protection from men was really important. We are the literal weaker sex in that regard. And so we needed men for that. And then protection, I would say in my mother's generation, was more social protection, right? Because if you weren't married, there must be something wrong with you. And if you were divorced, you're ostracized because there weren't a lot of people divorced. Well, now everyone knows someone who's divorced at least once.
Yeah.
So there's not a stigma. So now we are redefining our relationships, and I'm talking heterosexual relationships, obviously, but we're redefining what are our roles inside this? And if I'm here, why am I choosing to be here? And so now women are saying, I want this connection with this other human being. Women are we're built for nurturing and connection with other human beings. And in our pyramid, our hierarchy of what is important to us, relationships and the quality of them is at the top of the food chain for us. So that's why I see more women that are in the stay or go decision and really struggling with that question and still scared of the outcome. Whereas I would think, so again, my experience working with men directly is less so than with women, of course. But I'm fascinated by the male experience. So I just study it because I think it's super interesting. I think men are in a really interesting time right now where they're trying to figure it out. Like, well, if I learned what it means and what it looks like to be a man from my dad, except what it meant for him to be a husband, a father, that was very different. I joke with my dad because I'm like, you were across the street getting a sandwich when I was born. Like, you didn't even change a diaper. Right. And now in marriages, think about that difference of what we expect in terms of equality and equal workload and how you show up. And then, by the way, I want to know your whole inner world. I want to know your heart. And we have not equipped, like, men are supposed to show feelings. We teach them that from when they're little. Boys don't cry, right? So even to have language to be able to express that emotional inner world is a difficult thing, I think, for a lot of men. but not exclusively to men, because women will struggle with it too, especially if they're in a lot of masculine energy.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting time.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's such a good point that so much has changed in just one generation. I mean, it's such a short period of time that
Right.
this has all changed. And now people are in these relationships and the rules aren't the same,
Right.
that their parents grew up with. Our parents, what we saw growing up in our families doesn't hold true in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
I'm curious how long, in your experience, maybe this is just a guess or just from what you see, how long being in a relationship, are there different phases that happen before someone starts to feel like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Why am I so unhappy in this relationship?
Mhm. So this is imperfect, right? To say like at this specific time
Yeah,
and
every
place,
situation's
it's so
unique.
different, but for sure. All right. So if you go back to what you were talking about, where and I think we were talking about this before we got on the call, but we were saying how we learned what love and marriage looks like by watching our parents growing up. And so we come into relationship with love, hope, and what we saw our parents do. But they didn't have any tools and training either. So, for instance, my mom, when she would get mad at my dad, she'd stonewall him.
Mm-hmm.
She would hold out for days. She would not talk to that man for days. And she would never be the one to apologize. She would always wait for my dad to come and apologize to her, which he always inevitably did. So, how did I learn to deal with conflict? But watching my mom, and I'm like, oh, you give them the silent treatment, and eventually they'll come groveling. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's not healthy. Like, I know that now, but I didn't know that in my first marriage.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So we come into relationships. So it's usually, if you say, I'm going to say around 10 years, because the early years, you're building something together. And I feel like sometimes, and this is not all the time, but sometimes, when you get married, it's a bit of a box we want to check. Like if you think about, everyone gets married at different ages these days, but let's say in your 20s, I want to have a career. I want to have a marriage. I want to have a family. I want to have a house. Like you have a vision for what you want your life to have and what you want to accomplish and achieve and stuff. And so then you get married and we sort of check that box and we put it over here on this little shelf because it's not a problem. So we pour our love, our time, attention, energy into whatever we want to create next. And that might be a career, it might be a family, it might be a home, whatever it is. And so we pour our energy and attention into that. And we assume this is going to take care of itself because we love them. But then, because we're not paying attention to it, it doesn't happen right away. It goes really, really slowly, and we get more and more disconnected. And certainly, as kids come along, they get a lot of our attention and love and energy and focus, as they should. But then the disconnection just keeps growing wider and wider. And then there's even some resentment, but we can't resent our babies. That goes against, we can't possibly resent our kids, but we can resent our partner. How come you're not making my life easier? Maybe I wouldn't feel this overwhelmed if you were doing more for me, or how come you're not meeting my needs? And then it starts to, around the 10-year mark, it starts to get tricky, and you're either going to pay attention to it there. I call it the rumble strip. You're on the rumble strip, like when you're driving along the freeway, and if you get distracted, those bumps alert you, like get back in your lane.
Mm-hmm.
If you hit the rumble strip and you deal with some of the things, then it's pretty manageable to work with someone or a couple and bring them back into their lane,
Mm-hmm.
into a really loving lane. But if you ignore it, it doesn't get better with time. Problems don't age well when you ignore them. So they get worse and they get worse until you're finally ready to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're just human beings. This is us humaning.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I feel like, when you were giving the example of your mom dealing with conflict by stonewalling, I feel like there are so many of those things that we're not even conscious of,
No.
that my brain goes to why isn't my wife, doing the relationship the way she's supposed to? And
Right.
it's not like I can make sense of what's going on in between us, or the things that my expectations from looking at my parents growing up, or the way she's doing things. And, I feel like it's so easy once you have kids to get distracted by what's going on with them and put all of your attention on that. And then all of a sudden, like you said, maybe 10 years later or whatever time, you're like, why am I so resentful and unhappy in all of this?
Right. Right. So, our kids are thriving because we pay a lot of attention to them, but then the relationship isn't, because we sort of put it on a shelf and said, oh, we'll get back to it someday. But that could be 25 years later. If you have 2 or 3 kids, that could be 30 years later. Like,
right.
And then you're staring at this person across from you like they're a very kind stranger to you, because life changes and evolves us, but we didn't stay connected through the process. So, and this is where we find ourselves in some trouble. And then we start going, can this even be fixed, or is it just too far gone? And then do I have to end it? And what the heck does that even look like?
Yeah, so great. So that brings us to, I feel like that's a good intro to bring us to sort of the topic at hand. When couples are in that moment, no matter how long they've been together, they get to that moment and they're like, uh-oh, we got to do something here. We got to make a decision. Or maybe it's I need to make a decision.
I was going to say, they're often not doing it together as a couple.
Right, exactly. Right. It might be a different picture if that was the case. But yeah, it's usually an individual thing, right? Where it's like, I need to make a decision about what I'm going to do here. What are some things that people can think about in that moment, or as a therapist or coach, what are things that we can think, how do we help guide people who are in that moment?
So there's lots of things, but I'll tell you a couple things that I think are really important. One is that, as you said, it's usually one person that's thinking about it. And I think oftentimes that person thinks they have to come to a decision in a vacuum. And so they keep all this, I'll call it work, although it's not all work. Usually it's just mind clutter. They're spinning around in indecision. They keep it all internal. They keep it all to themselves. Now, they might tell their best friend. They might tell their sister. They might confide in other people, but they're not confiding in their partner. And so what I will often do is challenge women that I work with and say, let's just say that your partner was making a decision that was going to impact you and your life forever. Would you want to be involved in that decision at all? Would you want to be clued into that? Or would you like for them to just come to that decision on their own and then surprise you with that decision once they've made it? And of course, the answer is no, I want to be involved in that. But yet they're over here doing that very thing, which is I have to come to this decision all on my own because I'm so afraid to have the difficult conversation with my spouse I feel so disconnected from you and I don't know what to do. And I don't know if it can be fixed. And I don't even know what it means because that feels vulnerable. And so we run away from vulnerability, but that's where the magic can happen. That's where the miracles can happen. That's where connection can happen. So that's the first piece. The second thing, and this is not the only path to coming to clarity about your marriage, but I would say it's the most direct path. And that is, if the options are, we think the options are stay or go, stay and endure a bad marriage, or go and blow up my life. Those both are horrible options. So I try to soften it a bit, which is, can I stay and evolve this relationship to a place that feels good for me? Because it's not about just staying and sucking it up and dealing with it as it is. That's what we've told ourselves, but it's never, that's an option, but it's not a good option. You don't have to choose that option. If you're going to stay, let's get equipped with some real tools that you can then begin applying to your relationship so that you can see, can we interrupt some of the patterns that have gotten us in trouble? Can we understand one another in a new way? Can we show up differently to the relationship? And what kind of shift does that create between us as a couple? And so the most direct path is to see, I call it the 2.0 version of your marriage, just like Apple comes out with a new phone every 6 months or something. And it has new functionality and new features and new things we didn't even know we needed. It's the same thing with our marriages, that like what you came into at 30 years old with love, hope, and what you saw your parents, that is not enough to sustain you for, I don't know, 5 or 6 decades. So let's evolve the relationship to what it would need to entail for you to feel really good about it today, for both of you to feel really good about it, where it is that you are today as a couple and as an individual.
Mhm.
And if it can evolve, lovely. And if it can't, then you do have an answer that you can make peace with if you've given it your very best shot, if you've gotten equipped with the tools and you've really applied those tools repeatedly until they become more habitual. And if it really still doesn't work, then you can make peace with that decision. But if you just never try and you just sit in indecision and it just is an intellectual game that you play with yourself all day about what are my odds about, well, will it work? Should I try? I'm not going to try if it's not guaranteed. If you try your best at anything, you will never regret trying, especially when it comes to your marriage, the foundation of your family. So the most direct path is, yeah, really try. And when people say like, we're working on our marriage and what they're doing is they're being nice to each other, that is not working. That is table stakes. That is like, if you can't even like each other, you can't be kind to each other, you can't be patient with each other, what the hell are we doing? Like you're not even equipped to be in a relationship anyway, if you can't do those basics.
Right.
So get equipped with relationship tools that will help you. Like when I was giving my first husband the silent treatment, I didn't even have words for it. I didn't know that Gottman called it stonewalling and that it's a predictor of divorce. I had no idea. I'm just like, that's what I saw my mom do. This is what you do.
Right.
Right. Because I wasn't a coach at the time. So I had no idea.
Right. And I feel like when you started talking about this, there was this sense that, it's an individual who is struggling with this decision. And one of the first steps that needs to happen is for them to feel like they can have a voice about what's going on. And I feel like a lot of people want to avoid that conflict. And they feel like if I try to say that I'm not happy in this situation, then it's just going to lead to more fighting. And maybe they've tried and maybe it has led to more fighting, but that's one of the first things I feel like that needs to happen, that they can understand that there's a way of doing that perhaps that's different, because not telling their partner is just going to lead to more of the same.
Right. And that's not fair. Like
Right.
your partner deserves.
They haven't even given them a chance to
Right.
work on it. Yeah.
Right. I don't even know that you're struggling with something. I just think you might be a little irritated today. So I'm just going to stay out of your way. Like, I don't even know that you're feeling lonely or disconnected or unloved or unappreciated. I have no idea. And a confused mind will always do nothing. So if your partner is confused by what they're getting from you, and then you just keep resenting that you're not getting your needs met, like we're not getting anywhere good. So when you were sharing that, I was thinking about how sometimes I'll ask my clients, well, what have you, like, does your husband realize how much you're struggling? Well, I've been telling him I'm not happy. I've told him several times. So I challenge people when they do this because, and this is the way that we try to communicate with our partners, and then it doesn't work or it turns into an argument and then we never do it again, is because we'll say, I'm unhappy. Like, I'm handing this off to you. You should know what to do with it. Take good care of my happiness. Do something. Make me happy. My friends, most of us don't know how to make ourselves happy, but we hand off our happiness to our partner and say, you're responsible for this. I'm not. You are. Figure it out. I'm not going to leave you any breadcrumbs. I'm not going to give you any clues. You just need to make me happy. Do it. And so just saying I'm not happy and expecting your partner to know what to do with that is a little bit unrealistic. So this is where, like, when I say get equipped with real tools, get equipped with tools to know how to communicate very directly and specifically with your partner so that you can have real conversations and come to conclusions with each other and maybe even work through some of these challenges. But if we just say, I'm not happy, and we toss it over to our partner, like, your turn.
Yeah, that's such a good point. It's sort of along the lines of something that I hear sometimes, which is like, they ask their partner, they said, I would feel a lot more loved if you started doing this and this. And then their partner starts doing this and this. And they're like, well, you're only doing that because I asked you to. It's like, well, yeah, of course. That's why they're doing it.
Right. Like it doesn't count if I had to tell you.
Yeah,
It only counts if you read my mind. We have to get out of this. I'm not going to say a bad word on your podcast.
that's fine.
It's not helpful.
Yeah. Right.
It's not helpful. So we should leave our partners breadcrumbs because the truth of the matter is you do need something different than I do. And my partner probably needs something different in the relationship than you do. So we all need something different and we can't read each other's minds. And so when we don't know, we're either going to do nothing, we're going to guess, or we're going to give you what I would need, which is only going to be wrong about 90% of the time. Or instead of sending our partner into the minefield with no map, we could give them a map and say, this is what I'm feeling. And when you do this, when you've done these things in the past, that really makes me feel loved. But I feel like we've gotten out of that, right? It's even a difference of when you do this, it makes me feel unloved. That's the negative. But show them when you've done this before, that's what makes me feel really loved. That's what makes me feel appreciated. Because what you're then telling your partner is they can do it. They've done it before. And they want to please you. I promise you, your partner does not wake up every day going, how can I screw up her life today?
Right.
How can I make her feel unloved? Like they're not thinking that. They want to please you. They may not know how. And so we've got to be able to have those mature conversations. If we're going to adult relationships, we need to adult the relationship.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking about when you said, as third graders, we should be teaching people, let me add part of it. You can tell me if you agree or not.
Yeah.
I think we should be teaching people how to value themselves and how to feel worthy for themselves and be able to say what they want in the world. And I think as a society, we're doing a terrible job with that. And so we grow up into adults and we're hoping that we'll meet that one person who can make us feel worthy and loved and valued instead of realizing that has to start within ourselves.
Yeah. It has to begin there. And so then we show, let's just play this out. If I don't feel worthy of love, and let's say our partner has some insecurities too, because we all do. We all have our bag of stuff that we carry around, the wounds that we've picked up along the way. And if I come with this void of, I don't feel worthy of love, and then we get married and then we place that responsibility at the feet of our partner, which, by the way, we've never told them and they've never agreed to it. Right. I always say we should walk down the aisle with our big book of written out expectations because there are many and we don't talk about them. But like, you're going to love me enough that I'm finally going to feel worthy of being loved. So you're responsible for that. But he has his own void that he hasn't told you about. And so maybe it's something similar, like maybe it might not come out like loved, it might come out as desired. I want to feel desirable. And so I need you to point your desire at me consistently so that I can feel desired and worthy of being desired, right? And then so now we're here trying to fix each other's wounds, which is never our job. Like that's our job, our wounds to heal. That's our job. But what I will tell you is that, you know how they say, when you get married, you marry the whole family.
Yes.
Which you do.
Right.
Okay. I think it's worse. I think it is you marry every experience that person ever had that created their entire inner world. And we bring our entire inner worlds to our marriages. We don't bring them to work. Right. We don't even bring them to our friendships necessarily, but we bring them inside our intimate relationships. And that's where they're going to show up. That's why I think our intimate relationships are our greatest teachers. Because they're going to bring up all of our stuff that is unhealed. But the problem is we keep looking for our partner to do that work because it's hard work. So it's so much easier to say, well, you should go do this. You should fix this. You should change so that I can feel the way I want to feel. It's not working.
Yeah. And I think it's perpetuated by the media, by movies, by, the idea that of what romance should look like.
Don't get me started.
And I think, like you said something about as a mature adult, we should be able to ask for what we want. I mean, it's totally fine if I want to ask my partner, I love it when you do this and this, it makes me feel desired.
Mhm.
I'm making a request as a mature adult, and I am willing to accept yes or no that, or that my partner could say, well, I can't do that way, but I'll try it this way, and that we
Mhm.
can like work with each other. It's
Right.
not that like, first of all, that she should read my mind and we should be on the same page about all of that. And at this, whatever. And also that if they're not doing that, it means that they don't care about me.
That they don't care, that they
Right.
don't love me, that or that I'm not lovable. Like we
Hmm.
give it all this meaning. I think that's an important thing. I think one of the most important questions you can stop and ask yourself when you feel any of that sort of angst against your partner is to stop and ask yourself, what am I making this mean?
Hmm. Yeah, that's
Because
great.
we give meaning to everything. Our minds are just meaning makers of every situation. And we can make our partner saying, when you do this, it makes me feel loved. We can make that mean, oh, I'm not doing it right. I can't do anything to please you. Or we can make it mean, she's giving me information here, or he's giving me information here. I get to choose what I do with this, and I get to choose how I show up in this relationship. Like you get to choose what you're going to make that mean. But most often we give it meaning that's fear-based or ego-based. And that's the stuff that's getting in the way of us really being able to have direct conversations or more dialogue, like what you're talking about, where it's not just, here's my need, you need to go meet it.
Hmm.
No, it's a conversation. Here's what I'm feeling. Here's how I'm thinking about it. When you do this, it makes me feel loved. He or she is going to have insights or opinions or perspectives on that. Well, I'm scared to do that because it makes me feel really vulnerable. What if every time I, want to be intimate and then you decline me, then I feel rejected by that? Well, we've got to be able to talk about that, but we don't. We just feel rejected and then we stop initiating. And then the sex life falls off. And then we make it mean that I'm not desirable or my spouse doesn't love me. And it's all because we just can't quite communicate. Because, by the way, no one ever taught us.
Hmm.
Where was the class on having interpersonal communication with your most intimate partner and doing it over the course of, I don't know, 4 or 5 decades together? There was no class on this.
Right. Right.
And it's hard. Communication is hard.
Yeah. And that's really normalizing for people to hear. It's not that there's anything wrong with people,
No.
it's that we just don't learn how to do this.
Honestly, I get a little more feisty about it because I feel like we've been set up to fail,
Yeah.
right? And as human beings, we don't address a problem that doesn't exist. We don't go looking for, I definitely don't want that problem in my life. So I'm not going to do this thing. We don't look for that. We wait till there's a problem and then we deal with the problem. But early on, there's not this communication problem,
Mhm.
right? And so our ability to communicate, even as unskilled as we may be, it's not that big of an issue. But the longer you go on inside of a marriage, communication goes down, not up, because we think I know everything there is to know about this person, which is never true. So we stop being curious. One of the things I love to teach on is the differences between men and women, and nowhere does that show up more than inside of communication because we communicate very, very differently. I
Mhm.
can have a conversation with a woman and she'll say things that are sort of like they're nuances, right? We can read between the lines, like we can understand what's not being spoken. But if you try to do that with a man, they're not going to understand what you're saying most of the time. And that's not because it's not because they're stupid or that women are better. It's just we communicate differently. Men are very direct. My husband is like, if he says he's doing this, this is what he's doing. He's not saying this, but meaning this. It's very direct and very
Mhm.
specific. And so when we try to do the between the lines stuff and not say the thing that we really need to say, that's where we miss each other.
Mhm. Yeah, and I feel like the things that we're talking about can bring so much hope for people, right?
Mhm.
Even in if it's the first time we're meeting with them, let's say as a couple or something like that, and you're introducing this idea that there's a whole different way of doing a relationship. There's a whole different way of communicating with each other. that you don't have to stay miserable in the same relationship, that staying with this person doesn't mean it has to be the same. You can do things in a totally different way. I feel like all of a sudden, even though there's a lot more work to be done, probably, all of a sudden this couple has much more hope and a different perspective about what's possible.
Yeah. And I would say to give them more hope is communication is a learned skill.
Mhm.
So anyone can learn it. And by the way, every single person can get better at it. All of us can get better at communicating. And when we do, when we invest in becoming a better communicator, every single aspect of our lives improves,
Mhm.
right? Great leaders are great communicators, right? And if you get better at communication, that's going to improve your relationship with your kids, your relationship with your friends, all the people that you love and care about. It's going to improve every area of your life. It's going to improve your relationship with your boss and with the people who work for you. Like communication can help us in every single area. It's worth learning more about, and you can learn it. It's not like, oh, well, I'm only 5'4". I'll never be 5'7". I guess I just have to deal with it. This is not DNA. This is learned.
Right.
And
Yeah.
anyone can learn it if you want to learn it. And it will help you in every way of your life.
Yeah, that's great. There's something that I came across when I was researching you leading up to this episode, and I wanted to, maybe this will be the final question because I know we're getting to the end of the time,
Okay.
which is why should divorce always be an option for people?
So, Dr. Harriet Lerner, who I love her,
Yeah.
I got to about page 6 of her book of The Dance of Intimacy before I got really pissed off because I was like, darn it, why is it this way? But there was a part, it was like in her very first chapter of that book where she said, if you cannot navigate without your marriage, you cannot operate inside your marriage.
Mhm.
And so when we say, I call it the 5 dreaded words, till death do us part, it's sort of like saying we're going to stay together no matter what, no matter how miserable we make each other, and we stop trying. And so if divorce is not an option on the table, then you can cry about it. You can bemoan it. You can complain about it. You can rage against whatever's happening in the relationship. But if you will never, ever play that card, now I'm not suggesting you should threaten it, but if you are unwilling to ever play that card no matter what, then what is the motivation for the relationship to evolve, for either of you to change?
Mhm.
Because we're going to stay together no matter what. We said it. We made those vows. I mean, I had a client just recently who her husband had cheated on her 12 ways to Sunday.
Mm.
And she was just heartbroken. And she'd been struggling with it on her own for a year. And he wouldn't do any work around it. Like not even explore his own motivations. You know what I mean? Much less like
Mhm.
sit with a therapist. Or he just said it was basically a crude version of you're the one that's hurting. It's your problem.
Mm.
I think you need to figure out how to deal with it. So she's been struggling and struggling and struggling to try to deal with it. But divorce for a very long time was off the table for lots of reasons, lots of perfectly valid reasons, but it doesn't help her. It
Mhm.
doesn't help her heal. It doesn't help them evolve the relationship. It doesn't establish new trust between them. So I know it gets a lot of conversation when I say that because it's
Mhm. Yeah.
confronting that
No,
divorce
I
should
love,
always be an option.
yeah,
But
I love it.
if it's never an option, then you have no ability to set boundaries that are healthy and loving for you in your relationship. And you are allowed to have healthy boundaries for yourself in your relationship.
Absolutely. And those are the things that are attractive. You know, if I'm willing to be confident in my boundaries and say, this doesn't work for me, or this is what works better for me, you know, it will make us feel more connected with each other. We'll know each other better if we're willing to tell each other the truth
Yes.
about the things that we want or exist in our life, whatever they are.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Good.
Yeah. Never use it as a threat. Sometimes people hear that and they're like,
Yeah, that's right.
oh, no. Never, nope, because you don't play that card unless you're going to play it. Um, but it's actually a healthy thing. I remember when I was going through my divorce, from my first husband, I was going to a therapist. And he said that he had been working with a couple for years. And he said every year on their anniversary, they would ask each other, do you want to do this for another year? And I thought, you know what? There is some health to that.
Yeah.
Because then you're consciously saying, like, we have a choice in this. And are we going to choose one another for another year? And it's not guaranteed that just because we said it at 27, we're going to mean it at 55. Those are That's a very different place in your life. You had no idea at 27 what 55 was going to look like and feel like. So
yeah, and I think it just shifts your mindset. And you talked about that feeling of stuckness at the beginning, you know, and it moves you away from, I'm not stuck in this relationship. This is a choice I'm making.
that's right.
And I have good reasons to keep making that choice for myself.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And when you're making it from an empowered place, it'll always feel better than like, I'm trapped, because you're never trapped.
Yeah, that's great. Good. Well, how can people find out more about you? Do you have
Well, if they want to go check
website?
out my book, they can go to stayorgobook.com. That's probably the best way. I've written a bunch of books, but honestly, this is my best one. And it's the one that has been sold more than any other book by far. So, it's the most helpful one. So that's the one that I would point them to. Stayorgobook.com.
Stayorgobook.com. I'll put that in the show notes. Anything else you want to mention?
No,
going on? All right.
I think, well, I just wrote another book, so there'll be another one coming. I'm on 10. People are like, when are you going to stop writing books? I'm like, I don't know. I have a lot to say, apparently.
That's great.
So there'll be more in the works.
What's it going to be about?
It's still the Stay or Go decision, but it's very specific to women in midlife, where the Stay or Go book is more general for anyone who's struggling with the decision.
Okay, great. Yeah. Exciting.
Yeah.
Good. Well, maybe we'll have to get together again and talk about that in the future.
Why not? I'm game.
All right. Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah. Thanks, Shane. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, everybody, for watching the show. I'm Shane Birkel, and this is the Couples Therapist Couch podcast, a podcast that's all about the practice of couples therapy. If you enjoyed the show, please hit subscribe. Please hit the like button. And you can continue to get all of the most up-to-date information in the world of couples therapy. If you are a therapist who's interested in learning more about the practice of therapy, or if you're someone who just wants to learn more about how to have a good relationship, definitely hit subscribe so you can get all of the latest episodes. Thank you so much. Also, if you're interested in the Couples Therapist Inner Circle, you can click on the link in the show notes. But thank you so much for watching. I'm Shane Birkel. This is the Couples Therapist Couch.